I never liked it in school, but it's the thick of the off season, so we're going to start with some lightning grades, going through some lightning lines and some fun moments in the season and grading them. First up, Tampa Bay Lightning's line one offense.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Josh Sperber here, thanking all of you for making Locked On Lightning your first listen every day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if your team is the Tampa Bay Lightning, then this is the show for you. As I mentioned, we'll be talking about some line grades. So let's get right to it, starting with the line one offense. We're going to be going down different lines, obviously lines 1 through 4 on offense, some fill-ins, some call-ups over the course of the week. And we're going to start with the Lightning's line one offense, which might seem like a pretty easy grade. Now, obviously, the lines change at a pretty frequent pace over the course of the season. So I am just going to simplify it. And the most used line one offense, I'd say, was Jake Guentzel, Braden Point, Nikita Kucherov. This might be the easiest one in terms of the most used ones. But if you guys don't agree, you can talk about it in the comments. This one I feel like won't get too much debate, though. Guentzel, Point, Kucherov were maybe the top 3 players on the entire Tampa Bay Lightning team. I think an argument can certainly be said for Brendan Hagel getting up in there as well. But Guentzel, Point, Kucherov were all 3 of the top 4 scorers for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Braden Point led the way in terms of goals. Nikita Kucherov led the way in terms of points and assists. And each of them had a plus-minus over 17 as well. Nikita Kucherov nominated for, well, everything. Art Ross Trophy winner, Hart Trophy nominee, Ted Lindsay Trophy nominee. Braden Point is nominated for the Lady Byng Trophy. And Jake Guentzel didn't get any award nominations, but I think that if there was an award for best offseason acquisition, it would absolutely be him. I mean, I've said this time and time again over the course of the season, but I mean, getting Jake Guentzel for a third-round pick was highway robbery. He's now locked up for the next 6 years, and he had such an incredible season over the course of his first year with Tampa Bay, and it's just remarkable to see a guy, especially someone who has been traded as much as he has, just come right out and make an instant impact. And yeah, I mean, these guys are pros. I think they've got pretty high expectations on them, I would say. And I think Guentzel met or exceeded any expectation that a Lightning fan could have possibly had for him. You know, he came up in the clutch when needed for Tampa Bay. He had 5 game-winning goals, which amounted to third most on the entire Lightning team, finished 4th in points, 17 power play goals, which led the league, and, of course, led the Lightning, even more so than Point and Kucherov. I mean, just absolutely dominant was Guentzel on that first line. I mean, he chipped in on defense as well. You know, he might not be the two-way force that an Anthony Cirelli or Brandon Hagel are, but you look at all these Lightning players and even the guys like Kucherov, who is really just the offensive maestro, can get back and make checks on defense. Braden Point can just seem to, him and Guentzel are just 2 guys that seem to be everywhere on the ice at once with the speed that they have. And, you know, the Lightning forwards, even if they're more offensively dominated, they still play pretty well on defense. But I think with this first line especially, I don't know if there was a higher scoring line in all of the NHL. I mean, it just, they seem to have just such instant chemistry. And even from the get-go, Guentzel was able to get involved. 2 assists in his first game with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Had to wait a couple days before he got his first goal as a member of the Bolts. But Guentzel was excellent for Tampa Bay, and Braden Point just continued to show his ascension really into superstardom. I mean, at the end of last year, he was one of the first 6 players named to Team Canada for 4 nations. And I know I feel like I've harped on that quite a bit. But I mean, with the amount of talent coming from Canada to the NHL, and especially in hindsight, knowing that Canada ended up winning the 4 nations, to have Braden Point as one of those top 6 players selected is a pretty big deal. And I think he might have had a little bit of a downturn when it came to points. 82 points in 4 fewer games than he scored 90 last season, but his plus minus was up to 17. Power play scoring was the 3rd most power play goals that he's had in his entire career, and 3rd most power play points, playing about 30 seconds less per game than he did last season. Braden Point is just continuing his rise into superstardom. And I think that, you have to mention his name when you're talking about some of the best players, some of the best centers, any metric that you want to divvy it up. Braden Point has to be up there when you're talking about some of the league's elite. And I think he really cemented that in terms of his offensive game over the course of this season. I mean, whether it's, taking open shots or just being near the net at the right time and finding the way to poke that puck in. Braden Point is just a guy who knows how to score. He knows how to be in the right positions to put himself in good opportunities to get pucks on net. And I'll say it a million times, I don't think there's anyone I'd rather have in front of the net knocking in loose pucks than Braden Point. I mean, he is just is such a smart hockey player, so adept at finding those loose pucks and just helping them find their way into the net. And of course, there are a few people, by any way you slice it, better at getting pucks in net than Nikita Kucherov. Really served as the anchor of not just that top Lightning line, but the entire Tampa Bay Lightning offense. Kucherov is really just the key piece, the linchpin, the anchor, anything you want to call it. He's just the gas that makes that offense go. And again, he proved it this year. A lot of people are talking about with Kucherov and Nathan MacKinnon how they both dropped off in terms of points, but Kucherov had 23 fewer points in 4 fewer games than he did last season. But I mean, you can't get 100 assists every single season. That's just not feasible. And I think Kucherov, who was one of the offensive leaders in terms of shifts per game, only trailing Anthony Cirelli and Nikita Kucherov, partly because those two were on the penalty kill most times. Kucherov is a guy who is going to give you his best for every single minute of that game. And his best usually involves a couple goals, a couple assists. I mean, the amount of multi-point games that he puts together on a regular basis just is continually impressing. I think he'll win the Hart Trophy this year. I think it'll be a disservice if he does not win the Hart Trophy this year. And maybe even the Ted Lindsay as well, because it's certainly hard to argue that Nikita Kucherov is the best, one of the best anyway, like just top 2, top 3, top 1. I mean, all those arguments I think are legitimate when it comes to Nikita Kucherov. And I think Lightning fans know his impact on the game. And frankly, it's for me, for my sake, to be able to say that he's one of the players that I, have to watch on a nightly basis is honestly amazing. I mean, it's just what he can do with a hockey puck is pretty impressive. And it seems like a pretty easy one for the Lightning's top line offense, leading the league in goals this season, in goals per game, highest scoring offense in the season. And this was the highest scoring line, combining for well over 200 points. So I don't think I'm going to ruffle any feathers when I give this Lightning's offense line 1 an A+, as I'm going through the grades for this season. These are 3 elite players showing that they're among the best in the league. Jake Gensel, Braden Point, even showed out in Four Nations, both of them with multiple points in the Four Nations tournament. And Gensel being one of the scoring leaders as well there. And, of course, Nikita Kucherov being a finalist for multiple prestigious awards. Braden Point's a Lady Byng Award finalist as well, which is certainly a big achievement as well to even be nominated as a finalist. And I think Point's got a big chance to win. But one thing that all three of those players will get is an A+ grade here on Locked On Lightning. And we're going to go from the offense to the defense, continuing with more grades of Lightning lines when we return. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Get snackin' and get crackin' with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. That's the link below, wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Went through the top line on offense. How about the top line on defense for the Tampa Bay Lightning? And we're going to go with the line combination that was really meant to be for most of the season and still kind of was. I know Darren Radish did get some time on that top line with Victor Hedman. We're going to talk about him actually in the next segment because most of Darren Radish's run did come when the Lightning went 11-7. But the line one defense, I think, was for the most part this season was, of course, the captain Victor Hedman and J.J. Moser, the big trade acquisition from the Utah Hockey Club, and along with Connor Geekie for Mikhail Sergachev. J.J. Moser did miss a good chunk of the season. Unfortunately, he suffered an injury back in December that caused him to be out from the beginnings of December until the Four Nations tournament ended in February. And something about J.J. Moser that I feel like we talked about like at points over the course of the season, but maybe not enough, to be completely honest, is the fact that Moser switched positions at the start of the year. He got called up midway through 2021-22, back when the Utah Hockey Club was the Arizona Coyotes. The next 2 seasons, he played almost in full, missing just 2 games in his final 2 seasons for Arizona before being traded to the Tampa Bay Lightning at the end of June in 2024. Moser has 1 year left on his contract and is, as I mentioned yesterday, playing with Team Switzerland in the IIHF tournament after being a participant for Switzerland in 2019, 2021, and 22 in the IIHFs. And I think the injury definitely kind of skews Moser's participation in the season, because if you look at his, like, what his stats ended up being before and after the injury, I mean, it's just night and day. I think he had 10 points already at the point of the injury. Didn't score after in the second half of the season after he got healthy again and returned to the Tampa Bay Lightning line. And Moser didn't add another goal. He had 2 earlier on, and it was, I think, part of the reason that the Lightning went down from the top scoring unit in the NHL to what ended up being the 3rd scoring defensive unit in the entire NHL. And I think it could have been a little bit more if J.J. Moser had played the whole season. I feel like with the way that the Lightning score goals on defense, it's just hard to really predict that. Victor Hedman led the way defensively for the Lightning with 15 goals. No one else had more than 6 for Lightning defensemen. That honor shared by that mark shared by Darren Radish and Nick Perbix. And I mean, the defensive unit for the Lightning, I think, had such a big role in their offense. And at times, the Lightning might have been pushed up a little bit too far, maybe made a couple of careless mistakes, and it ended up in goals going the other way for the opponent. I think that is relatively common, to be honest. I think that, that sometimes can just be how the game works. I mean, you want to push all five of your skaters out forward to have a role in the offense. And frankly, I think few teams did that better than the Tampa Bay Lightning. Just sometimes the defensive part of it suffered a little bit. I don't think that was because of JJ Moser and because of, him switching positions and not being used to the other side of the ice. Really, I think that you really, it really didn't matter which side of the ice that Moser was on, that Hedman was on. I mean, these are both kind of players that, especially with Moser's speed, these are both players that can really get just about everywhere on the ice. And Julien Brisebois predicted a top 5 Norris Trophy finish for Victor Hedman, which I certainly think is adept. We talked about the quarter century snubs, and Hedman might not have been the biggest snub, but I mean, he's certainly worthy of being on that team. I think, for a guy who has been playing for over a decade at an elite level, and, for the most part, he has really been getting better just about every season. He's just continued to hold such a high standard of play. And I think the promotion to captaincy for Victor Hedman as well was an absolute slam dunk for the Tampa Bay Lightning. I mean, he's the unquestioned leader on the team. And he leads by example, both on and off the ice. You don't hear any kind of excuses for the team losing, for bad play, whatever it is, from Victor Hedman. He just kind of tells it like it is, and has a very clear understanding of what the Lightning did well, didn't do well, and really just everything about the game. And he continues to lead the Tampa Bay Lightning in minutes and shifts. I mean, for a guy at 34 years old that just can't seem to get off the ice, and who has played 75 games or more in each of the last 4 seasons, is truly impressive. And it's really hard to diminish the kind of impact that Victor Hedman has on a game. And I think it really showed. Again, I think JJ Moser's season was definitely, you had the pre-injury and the post-injury, but you could really tell how much he was learning from Victor Hedman. And I think that, as I mentioned yesterday, the IIHFs are a big opportunity for Moser to really, get his sea legs back under him and get used to playing at a high level against elite opponents once again. And, obviously Moser came back with, plenty of time left in the season, plenty of time to warm up for the playoffs. But I mean, a serious injury like that, I saw, I would see Moser walking around Amalie Arena, just coming around the locker room. Obviously, he was in attendance for all the home games, and he was still with the team, but you could tell that he was seriously limping. And especially for, of a hockey player at an elite level like that, to be limping around, that the pain has to be pretty serious, and the injury unfortunately was. So I'm certainly, I think Moser is going to be ready for a big bounce back season next year. I think Victor Hedman's presence on that line did enough to make the Lightning's top defensive line, really solid. Would I put it on the same kind of pedestal in terms of being one of the best lines in hockey that I'd say about the Lightning's first line forwards? Maybe not. But again, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Lightning had a ton of injuries, I think, on the defensive side. JJ Moser's that had him out for 2 months plus, maybe being one of the biggest. It certainly didn't take away from Victor Hedman. And, it really didn't look like there was a missing piece with Darren Radish filling in between there. So I definitely don't think this is going to be an A+ grade. I still think this is going to be in the A level, but an A- bordering on a B+, I think. But definitely just with kind of the adversity that Moser had to go through, I'll give them a little bit of a benefit of the doubt. And it's definitely a low A-, but an A- for the Tampa Bay line 1 defense. I think that we'll talk tomorrow about the line 2 defense for Tampa Bay. But was it an elite line on a pure defensive standpoint? Yeah, probably. Offensively, definitely helps out a bit more. Victor Hedman, I think, has been one of the better offensive defensemen since he came in the NHL. So it might not be as high a grade as the Lightning line 1 offense, but the line 1D, I think, gets a solid A- for its role in both the offensive and defensive side of the Tampa Bay Lightning's, game plan, operation, all of that. And for the final grades of the day, we're going to go in a little bit more depth about Darren Radish specifically when the Lightning went 11-7, and then also the defensive call-ups, Max Crozier, Declan Carlisle, and Steven Santini. So we talked a little bit about Darren Radish, filling in for J.J. Moser on the Lightning top line, which I think certainly was a big part of his career high point total of 37. Tied his career best with 6 goals, had 4 more assists than he did last season, despite playing in 9 fewer games and 2 minutes per game less on the ice for Darren Radish. And he was, I mean, I feel like saying that he really saved the Lightning season might be going a little bit overboard. And I'm probably right in that. But I think that, Moser going down early when he was really starting to kind of click in, and it just seemed like he had finally started to get into a groove in that month before that month of December injury. And Darren Radish, I wouldn't say he saved the Lightning season, but he definitely stepped up and stabilized the Tampa Bay Lightning defense. And it just couldn't, I don't think his role was an easy one. It just seemed like, with the exception of those 2 months where Moser was injured, you didn't really know where Radish was going to factor in on the defensive side, whether he was going to, get pulled up to a different line, whether he was going to play at all, or whether the Lightning were going to go 11-7 and he was going to get some extra run. But I think that, Radish showed that he can just really be a team player. And I think that really has to count for something. And we're going to talk about the call-ups a little bit, but I am going to give Radish, an individual grade as well. But I think Radish's contributions, a lot of it aren't things that showed up in the stats sheet. I mean, it seems to be a pretty easy calling to, just be a team player and do whatever the team asks of you. And that is exactly what Darren Radish did. I mean, you talk to him about kind of switching lines and, moving around in terms of being in the Lightning's game plan seemingly every single night. And it didn't affect him. He knows he's going to play. And that's really it. And I honestly think that more players, not just in hockey, but there needs to be more players that are that willing to do whatever for the team, like Darren Radish is. And I think that he filled a necessary void for Tampa Bay, and is one of the reasons that I have been so adamant on the Lightning probably not bringing back Nick Perbix when we talked about his expiring contract a bit last week. But I think Darren Radish has just been that solid for Tampa, and they can really throw him in wherever they need it, whether they need him on that line 3 like he did, if Perbix needed a night off, if Lilleberg needed a night off, because that's the other thing. Radish mostly plays on the right side, but he showed that he could really play anywhere. The Lightning really put him any side of the ice. Moser, they really tried to move to that right side defense, just to have him on that line with Victor Hedman. But I mean, you could argue, and I know I did argue when it came to February, that Darren Radish deserved the extra time on Lightning's line one defense every bit as much as JJ Moser did, especially after Moser came back. And, Radish, I mean, you don't see a lot of guys step up and take one for the team in such a fluid role in the way that Darren Radish did. So, you can talk about his play on the ice. I think he's definitely a more offensive leaning defenseman. Definitely not in kind of a way that detracts from the way the Lightning play defense. He finished with a +9 despite, being just about everywhere on the ice, and even having to move up a little bit when the Lightning went 11-7. I mean, I think part of the reason that the Lightning did have to go 11-7 as much as they did in the postseason was to deal with the extra physicality that the Panthers brought and just getting some bigger bodies in there. But, if it didn't work, then they wouldn't keep going to it. And, Radish really showed that he can be an elite contributor, whether he's on a purely defensive side of things on a defensive line, or if he's going up kind of in that hybrid role that he played when the Lightning used him as the extra defenseman, and they kind of rotated him between lines in that 11-7 way that John Cooper runs so well. So I think for Darren Radish, the teammate grade, the grade that he gets, I think is a lot heavier based on, the team player aspect of it. I'm going to give Radish an A grade. I think, his stats, you maybe could have wanted more goals, more assists, but if you look at it, behind Victor Hedman, Radish was the highest scoring defenseman on the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I think that definitely deserves some notice, but I think that really the A grade is because he was asked to do so many different things on the ice, and he did all of them at a very high level for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I think individually, he was absolutely one of the best defensemen for Tampa Bay. And it is hard to grade some of the other defensemen. The three I mentioned earlier, Declan Carlisle, Steven Santini, Max Crozier. I think it's definitely harder to look at their contributions, considering combined they played less than 10 games. Steven Santini got in one game for the Bolts, played 11 and a half minutes on 18 shifts. Declan Carlisle played 3 games, averaged 13 minutes a shift. Max Crozier averaged 20 shifts and 16 and a half, a little bit more than that, minutes of ice time, with more games played than any AHL defenseman in the NHL, with 5 games. But what it did definitely show, especially with Carlisle, who got a goal, his first NHL goal in his Lightning debut, and Max Crozier, who just really proved that he could hang with the NHL guys. He could hang with the big boys and everything like that. And I think it just showed that the Lightning do have a couple of players in their AHL system that I think can factor in on the NHL next season. And there's a big reason that I've been mentioning Max Crozier's name so much over the last couple of weeks. And it's because I think that he can make an impact at the NHL level next year. I think he's going to be a guy that is fighting for an NHL job come September, come October, when we're really getting ready for the start of the season. And I think Max Crozier is going to have a real chance to make the Tampa Bay Lightning this year. And I think part of that is because of what he showed with Tampa Bay and what he showed as one of the strongest defensemen on a playoff team in the Syracuse Crunch. And, I don't want to diminish Brennan Halverson's AHL season. He was an all-star goalie. He did finish one of the better goaltenders in the AHL during the regular season. But I think part of the skill, part of the success that a goalie has is attributed to his defense. And Max Crozier played more than just about any defenseman in Syracuse over the course of the season. But again, it's really hard to grade those call-ups. I think that It definitely gave some promise towards the future for Tampa Bay. So I'm going to go with a B plus for the Lightning call-ups. I mean, it's hard to really. I think Declan Carlisle's goal definitely tipped the scales. I think Max Crozier showing out at both the AHL and NHL level, proving that he can be, a solid contributor. Carlisle ended up a +2. Crozier and Santini both were an even 0 in terms of plus minus. So they're staying pretty efficient. They're still moving the needle for the most part in the positive direction. But Declan Carlisle, Max Crozier are going to be two names to watch when it comes to training camp. I think partly because of what they showed they could do in a Lightning uniform, the other part within a Crunch uniform. But I'm going to give them a BB plus for the call-ups on the defensive side. We're going to keep going on with grades and other off-season musings over the course of the week. But until tomorrow, I just want to say thank you for tuning in and making Locked On Lightning your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, please make sure to check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night, until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale if you find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Wherever you found this podcast, please give us a like, a subscription. Send us your thoughts in the comments. We enjoy hearing from you we enjoy this. We really appreciate the fan support because we do this for you, the listeners, the fans of this show. So thank you all for tuning in for Locked On Lightning, and enjoy the rest of your week.